All right, we're good to go. Awesome. Okay. So this week we were asked to talk about situations in which we have employed the various sources of power, like in our roles or as a follower. And I was just thinking about how they talked about how power is just seen as like a negative or it's seen in like a negative context, and about how just in general that should kind of be changed, and people need to kind of maybe as leaders set aside time to kind of validate that they're using their power just in the best way that they possibly can. But some of the things that I've done is like the French and Ravens when they talk about the rewards power. And so I do that a lot at work when we have different things that come out and they want us to sell a certain amount of something, and you try to motivate your team and try to provide them with some sort of a reward for meeting those incentives that you've asked them. And that really seems to work well. And, everybody loves to get a reward when they do a good job. And something else is like the talking about sharing power, and how, like, just as my role is I'm a training store manager. And so that's something that I'm really passionate about. And so being able to like help others and keep them engaged and create that like environment of learning. But it's really just about like empowering them to kind of succeed and move on. Um, and then the cultural differences piece, I think really that just has to do with like understanding that there's going to be cultural differences in all walks of life, and just being comfortable to kind of communicate that and just say like, hey, if I'm doing something that you're not used to or that maybe offends you in some way, like please talk to me about it, and just being open, vulnerable that you might not be perfect in that way as well. And I think that ultimately that will kind of lead to some trust in the relationship too, to be able to say like, this isn't what I'm used to, or this is what I need from you. And I think that that would make a much better relationship. And that's what I've got.
Awesome. Let's hear from Anna.
Hi. So, on the topic of power, the types of power that I tend to implement the most are kind of like the same way you said with reward power, try to find incentives to make people want to, because work at Starbucks, so kind of similar. And also I have a slight form of legitimate power because I was appointed to the role of supervisor. So to a certain degree, you have people will do what you say because you're a supervisor, but without having any incentive for rewards, that they're not gonna, it's kind of like they're saying the costs versus rewards. Like if their job, what they're doing is too much of a cost, they're not getting enough of a reward for it, they're most likely not going to do what you want or leave the organization. And my cultural background, I feel like it kind of affects the way that I implement power as a supervisor, because I came from a family where it's everything very authoritarian kind of a background. So it's basically your parents, you do what they say. It's very like cut and dry. You don't talk back. And I feel like because of that, I'm kind of very opposite to that in the way that I use my power. Like I never want to be that do what I want because I said so. So I'll never use tactics to like reward or punish people in that way. But and because I want to use my referent power as a role model to try and be the type of employee that I want my employees to be, like to work hard and I want them to admire me and what I do and try to strive to be the same as a leader. And I feel like that helps me a lot more. But I realize that my culture has influenced me a lot in the way that I lead or use power. And I guess that's it for me.
Great. Let's hear from Kathryn.
So just like looking over the different sources of power, I really thought the ecological power really was something that I implement more. I'm really about empowering people to either make a change in their workplace. They are in 100% control of how they experience work. I mean, if you don't like something, change it. If you like something, make it better. You know what I mean? Like just kind of take it to the next step. I think that's how I try to be as a leader. Like if I don't like something, I'll get my manager involved or the other shifts involved. Be like, say, hey, this has been like a real big issue. I don't know if you felt the same or not, but I've noticed it on my shifts, and I really think that we can implement it a little bit differently and maybe get the baristas really fired up about it. And then reinforcement power, as well as making sure that they're highly task oriented, but they're happy with what they're doing. I don't ever want to make someone feel like they are constantly doing that. I think there was an instance yesterday where I was like, hey, like, I know you always do a trash run, but you're just so fast at it. Can you do it for me? And she's like, oh, absolutely, I'll do that for you. And I'm like, I feel like you have to ask, you have to kind of give that power to them in a way that they have a choice. And I don't like leaders who don't give you a choice, I feel like. So at least with Starbucks, I feel like that's something we've all had a big part in, is that we definitely get a choice. As far as the cultural differences with that type of leadership, I've run into a lot of issues where, like, if I just try to implement how I think they should be led without consulting them and figuring out how they're personally taking it, whether, they're different countries or different ethnicities or genders, whatever, I get a lot more kickback. So if I don't know them personally and haven't worked with them for a while, I'm like, how do you like to be led? What am I going to get the best reaction from you? And I do that with all of the people that I train, just because that's been the best way for me to, like, figure out how to lead better, but also then I gain a little bit more knowledge in the leadership area and exerting power, because then I am able to be a little bit more respectful to people. And it's just learning how people accept information and use it. So that's what I've got.
Awesome. Take it away, Paul.
Yeah, thanks, Brittney. And I guess as far as power goes, first of all, I guess as a follower, I've experienced, I think especially in my past 2 jobs, I've experienced more cohesive power. Cohesive? Am I saying that right? Cohesive?
Coercive. It's a weird one.
Coercive. All right, thanks, Brittney. But yeah, I think, definitely in my past 2 positions, that's more the style of leadership I've seen. And I guess also as a follower, maybe after especially seeing some other examples, it wouldn't be necessarily my favorite. I mean, I guess as long as they tell you the goals and they lay everything out, it shouldn't be an issue. But it works short term. But as far as long term goes, like, there's a lot of turnover in all those jobs, and it just breeds a lot of dissatisfaction between followers. So that's one thing I've noticed as a follower. One thing as a leader, I guess, I used, sorry, lost my train of thought, reverent power. I guess it was also in one of my previous positions. I transferred to a different location, and I had a lot of experience and knowledge about what was going on, and everybody else there was new. So I kind of took a leadership role, and everybody kind of looked at me because they knew what I was talking about, and it was pretty good experience. As far as cultural differences go, again, I've based all this on, like, past experiences. I think it would be the biggest one for me was I went to China a couple of years ago for an internship, and I noticed quite a bit of different. I guess culture does have a big impact on how you see leadership, and just like the biggest one, I guess, was power distance as far as follower and leader relationship. Like here, like in more Western cultures, you just want to you're more like not friends, but everybody's kind of equal. There, they expect quite the opposite. They want to be told what to do. They work more collectively as a group. So it was just interesting seeing the different aspects of it, and just being reminded again of that experience. And they're just more high context over there. and we're obviously a little lower on the spectrum over here. So that's all I have.
Totally. Thanks,
Might have
Paul.
ran over a little bit.
No, that was great. I had a funny time reading about the forms of power because I've done a couple of different jobs, and I think that I kind of naturally, like in work situations, like to take on a leadership role. And I would never think, oh yeah, I'm generally a coercive leader, until I started thinking about myself as a preschool teacher. And the description for coercive power is like pretty much what you have to implement all the time. Yeah, having like set expectations and them knowing what the repercussions are for not doing that. There was a quote in the book that was, humans would rather be punished than ignored, which is so true, especially for kids who have maybe like behavioral issues and stuff. I have kids where if you ignore them, they're going to like flip the table over. So it's like, if you're not going to say something nice to me, then it's all coming down. But also, so the coercive power was scarily appropriate, but also reward power. I mean, you offer a kid a sticker for sitting quietly, and they are going to sit quietly because stickers are extremely exciting to kids. Whereas if you tried to offer adults stickers for doing what you want them to do, they're going to probably laugh at you. I was thinking at my boyfriend's job, they have all of these incentives where if you are working on a project or something, somebody can just give you $25. Like they'll just be like, oh yeah, I just sent you a reward and for just like working really hard that day. And I'm like, well, I probably should not curse on the video, but if I could get sent $25 for doing a good job all the time, like Starbucks people, we don't get tips that are that good generally. The legitimate power also came into play because as a teacher, you have kind of the right and the responsibility to implement your power. So it was sort of legitimate. The kind that I thought would be most affected by cultural differences is the ecological power, probably. Just because somebody having control over your environment might have more to do with, I don't know, I was thinking that like a lack of education could really leave people susceptible to other people misusing their power. Just because if you can get somebody to second guess themselves and to think like, oh, I know a lot more than you do, I'm qualified to tell you about this, then you might be more likely to just be like, you're right, you do know more than I do, even if the person is misusing it. I read, it's horrible, but the freaking Larry Nassar Olympic doctor case, there were all of these situations where mothers asserted themselves a little bit in a situation, like, hey, why aren't you wearing gloves, or things like that, where they felt weirded out and they asserted themselves. And then he was able to be like, I am an Olympic doctor, and like just belittled them and made them feel like they didn't know what they were talking about, when in reality they had sensed something very real, and were able to be talked down because of somebody asserting their legitimate power. And I don't know, it just grosses me out that people can use that in a really negative way against people who are a little more susceptible, which has a lot to do with culture. That's all I have. I'll end on that really nice, pleasant note. We're at time.
All right.